If you'd been born in Wales 1,000 years ago, Halloween night wasn't about sweets or costumes. It was about making it to sunrise alive. If you've already seen our last Halloween video, then you'll know that we at Dark Wales Tours have a bit of a soft spot for the spooky season. In that video we took you deep into the haunted heart of Welsh Halloween, Nos Calan Gaeaf, the night when spirits roam freely and the veil between the living and the dead becomes paper thin. If you haven't seen it yet, it's a perfect companion to this one. We will leave it linked at the end for you. Think of that as the history and this as the field guide. So go give it a watch after this. If you survive, of course. Because today we're not just talking about Halloween traditions. This isn't a lecture. This is survival training. Imagine it. You're living in a small, windswept Welsh village centuries ago. The harvest is done. The nights are cold. The air feels heavy. The elders are whispering about spirits and omens. Fires burn bright against the endless dark. And you're trying to make it to morning without becoming the next local ghost story. This is how to survive a Welsh Halloween. Your complete survival manual for the world's oldest and darkest festival. We'll uncover the monsters that hunted in the night, the fires that protected the living, and the strange rituals people used to trick the spirits, or to join them. And along the way we'll explore why humanity still can't resist the thrill of the dark, from ancient Samhain fires to modern horror films. So light your candle, draw the curtains tight, and keep one eye on the door, because on Nos Calan Gaeaf the dead are restless, and they do so love to visit. Halloween as we know it is a Frankenstein's monster, stitched together from bits of Celtic festival, Christian adaptation, and a dash of modern mischief. But deep beneath all the candy and costumes lies something far older. Samhain, the Celtic festival of marking the end of the summer and the beginning of winter. Here in Wales it became Calan Gaeaf, the first day of winter. This wasn't simply a date on a calendar. It was the death of the year itself. A night outside of time, when the world seemed to exhale and darkness swallowed the edges of every field. For the people of ancient Wales, the end of the harvest meant more than cold nights ahead. It meant crossing the boundary between life and death. The Welsh believed that on Nos Calan Gaeaf, the night before winter's dawn, the veil between worlds thinned to a thread. The spirits of ancestors wandered home. The restless dead sought warmth, and beings far older than man drifted through the fog. It was a time when doors were locked, fires were kindled high, and every flicker of the flame felt like a prayer. They called these nights ysbrydnos, spirit nights, because the air itself seemed haunted. You could almost feel the past moving around you. Families gathered close, telling stories, burning offerings, and whispering charms to keep danger at bay. Yet, for all their fear, the people of Wales didn't run from the darkness. They faced it, cleverly, cautiously, with rituals born of both reverence and cunning. And yes, they did indeed dress for the occasion. The tradition of wearing costumes on Halloween isn't modern at all. It began as an act of camouflage. Villagers would disguise themselves with masks, soot, or animal skins, believing that if the spirits roamed free, the only way to survive was to blend in. If a ghost came calling, it might mistake you for one of its own and pass you by. It wasn't a party trick, it was survival. The first Welsh Halloween costumes weren't cute or clever, They were terrifying, crude and practical. Horned masks, rough cloaks, faces smeared with ash. A glimpse of someone in that getup by firelight would send a chill down your spine. Children and adults alike took part. Some even carried hollowed out turnips, carved with grimacing faces and lit from within by small flames. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? These were the ancestor of today's jack-o'-lanterns. Their purpose not decorative, but defensive. A flickering warning to wandering spirits. Keep away. And so the bonfires burned. The disguises hid the living from the dead. And all across Wales, people turned the act of surviving the night into a ritual performance. Part fear, part faith, part defiance. To the ancient Welsh, fear wasn't foolishness. It was wisdom. The coming of winter was a confrontation with the unknown. Death, scarcity, darkness, and the people of this land met it not with despair, but with story, song, and flame. They believed that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the ability to walk through it. So, when we light our candles today, carve our pumpkins and put on our masks, we're echoing the same instinct. We're saying to the darkness, I see you, but you won't have me tonight. That's the true origin of Halloween here in Wales. Not a night of fear, but of balance. A truce between the living and the dead. A celebration of endurance, of surviving the long night together. Now that you understand what kind of night you're dealing with, it's time for step 1 in your Halloween survival guide. Know your enemies. Because on Nos Calan Gaeaf, it wasn't just the cold you had to fear. It was what came walking with it. We've spoken about some of these spirits in our other videos. You may remember a few familiar faces, or lack of faces, depending on the ghost. But today, we're going deeper. This isn't the bedtime version. This is what you'd need to know if you were there, standing in a Welsh village 1,000 years ago, watching the last light die in the hills, and wondering who would reach you first, the frost or the dead. Let's begin with one of Wales' most famous phantoms, a Lady Wen, the White Lady. She's appeared in so many Welsh legends that no one quite knows how many there are. One for every valley, it seems. Sometimes she's the restless soul of a woman wronged, sometimes a guardian of hidden treasure, and sometimes a warning. Always dressed in white, often seen near bridges, wells or graveyards, places where the living and the dead cross paths. If you see her, you must never follow. She might beckon you, silent and beautiful, leading you to a place you'll never return from. We've covered her story in our other videos, but what people often forget is that on Nos Calan Gaeaf she is said to wander more freely than ever. The land itself lent her strength. People would avoid water at night lest they see her reflection appearing beside their own. But Lady Wen wasn't the only one prowling the borders of the living world. There was also the Hwch the tailless Black Sow, half pig, half shadow, fully nightmare. It was said to rise from the mist after the bonfires burned out, its hooves silent on the frosted earth. The villagers would tell each other, "Be home before the fire dies, or the Black Sow will take you." It was no idle threat. In some tales, it would chase those who lingered too long at the fire, devouring the last straggler. That's why the fires were so important. They didn't just light the night, they kept it at bay. And when they burned low, people would race home, each praying not to be the last one left outside. Even today, in some rural parts of Wales, there's an echo of that custom. The sense that Halloween isn't just a celebration, but a race against the dark. Now, let's add a few more names to your list of things not to meet after midnight. There's the Cwnanwn, the spectral hounds of the other world. We've mentioned them before when exploring Welsh mythology, but they're far too important to leave out here. They were said to hunt across the skies on certain nights, their howls echoing through the valleys. If you heard them far away, you were safe. But if their cries grew faint, if they sounded close, it meant they were right behind you. In some tales, they weren't evil at all, just hunting for lost souls, escorting them to Annwn, the Welsh underworld. But try explaining that to someone being chased by a pack of glowing-eyed, ghostly dogs. Then there's the Gwylchi, the dog of darkness. Very similar to the Cwnanwn, but solitary. A huge black hound with burning eyes, seen as a harbinger of death. Farmers swore they saw it lurking on lonely roads, following travellers too far from home. The Gwylchi wasn't always said to attack. Sometimes it simply appeared and vanished, leaving behind the knowledge that death was coming soon. Of course, no Welsh Halloween would be complete without the whisper of witches. On Nos Calan Gaeaf, it was believed witches gathered at crossroads and old stones, brewing charms and summoning spirits. Some even said they transformed into hares to steal milk from cows, or into ravens to spy on the living. If you saw a hare staring at you that night, you were best to look away and just keep walking. There were also fairies too, though the Welsh Tylwyth Teg weren't the sparkly kind you find on greeting cards. They were tricksters, sometimes benevolent, often cruel, and on this night the barrier between their world and ours was fragile. They could lure travellers into ring dances that lasted a minute to the human eye, but 100 years in fairy time. The only protection was cold iron or salt, simple things that carried immense power. And then, of course, there were Ysbrydion, the wandering dead. These weren't the heroes of ghost stories. They were the ordinary souls, the unbaptized, the unburied, the forgotten. On Nos Calan Gaeaf, they were thought to wander the paths of the living, looking for warmth or recognition. Some families would leave out bread and ale for them, the food of the dead, in hopes that a little kindness would keep them from knocking. So, as you can see, the ancient Welsh Halloween was less a spooky night and more of a supernatural traffic jam. Witches, fairies, ghosts, black hounds, and the occasional cursed spirit, all moving through the darkness together. The people who survived didn't do so by chance. They knew the rules. They respected the old stories. When you stood outside under the stars of Nos Calan Gaeaf, you weren't just staring into the night. The night was staring back. And in that moment, you had a choice. Run from fear or learn its name. And that's what makes Welsh folklore so powerful. Every ghost, every creature, every whispered superstition was really about understanding what we can't control. Death, winter, the unknown, they all took shape in these stories. And while we've mentioned some of these figures before, each time we revisit them, they reveal something new. They remind us that fear, in the Welsh imagination, was never just a story, it was a survival strategy. So, rule 1 of surviving a Welsh Halloween: know your enemies, because they certainly know you. If you've made it this far, you know what's out there. The white lady wandering the mist, the black sow stalking the shadows, the ghostly hounds howling across the skies. Now it's time for step 2 in your survival training. Build your defences. Because on Nos Calan Gaeaf, it wasn't enough to simply hide indoors and hope for the best. You had to prepare, spiritually, physically, and in a very Welsh way, communally. Every village, every family had its rituals to keep the darkness at bay. The most important of all were the fires. Coal surf, vast bonfires lit at the edges of villages or on the hills. They were more than just warmth against the chill. These fires were the beating heart of the community, a barrier of light in a landscape swallowed by shadow. They were purification, protection, and prophecy all at once. As the sun disappeared, people gathered around the flames, their faces flickering orange and gold, the smoke rising like a bridge between worlds. They cast offerings into the fire, herbs, grain, sometimes a lock of hair or a carving of wood, small pieces of themselves given to whatever powers might be listening. Each ember carried a wish for warmth, for health, for survival. But the fire wasn't just for praise, it was also a test. After the celebrations, everyone would take a stone, mark it with their name, and place it in the embers before the fire was left to die. By morning, they'd return to see what remained. If your stone was still there, you were safe for another year. If it had disappeared, cracked, buried, or stolen by spirits, well, the winter would not be so kind to you. Just imagine that moment. The dawn mist creeping over the hills, the ashes still faintly smoking, the hush as each villager searches for their name. Someone finds their stone missing, and the crowd falls silent. You wouldn't speak of it, but everyone would think the same thing. The spirits have chosen. It was a way to make sense of the unpredictable. Winter was cruel. People did not always survive. But the ritual gave shape to the fear, a way to face it rather than be swallowed by it. And if the fire was the first defence, the home was the second. When the bonfire's glow faded, each family took a burning stick from the sacred flame and carried it home to relight their hearth. That flame was thought to protect the household from evil through the long cold months. To let it die out was to invite the darkness in. Inside, people would seal their doors with charms. Rowan was especially prized. Its red berries were thought to ward off witches and malevolent spirits. Twigs of ivy, holly, or mountain ash might be tied into circles and hung above doors or windows. Salt was scattered across thresholds, not for seasoning, but for survival. Even the smallest details mattered. A bowl of clean water might be left out for thirsty spirits, a slice of bread or a little milk for wandering souls. These offerings weren't acts of worship, they were negotiations. A simple bargain: take this and leave my family in peace. And of course there were words, whispered charms, fragments of old language, passed through generations, some Christian, some far older, spoken softly, perhaps, but meant with the full force of belief. Outside, the last of the fires burned down, and the villagers scattered back to their homes. No one wanted to be the last one left on the road, not with the Hwch the Gwytter on the hunt. But even inside, you could never fully relax. The night of Nos Calan Gaeaf was long and watchful. Shadows danced in corners, wind moaned through cracks, and every creak of wood could have been a footstep. To keep courage, families told stories, ghost tales, legends, memories of ancestors. It was their way of passing the time, yes, but also of remembering that fear was shared. The oldest grandmother might tell of seeing the Tylwyth Teg as a child, or a hunter swearing he'd heard the Cwnanwn in the mountains. The stories were protective in their own way. To name a fear was to weaken it. And sometimes, as the firelight dimmed, someone would knock, just once, quietly. Maybe it was a late traveller, maybe a branch in the wind. But if you'd done your offerings properly, if you'd honoured the dead and sealed your home, you'd say a quiet prayer and let the sound fade away. Because answering that knock could be the last mistake you'd ever make. So if you were to survive Halloween in ancient Wales, you needed 3 things: fire, faith, and friends. Fire to keep the dark at bay, faith to believe you'd make it through, and friends because nobody, absolutely nobody, wanted to be the last one walking home alone. And while all of this might sound ancient, almost alien, the truth is, the instinct remains the same. We still surround ourselves with light when the nights grow longer. We still gather together to share stories that make the dark feel smaller. And we still decorate our homes with charms. Now it's plastic skeletons and fairy lights, but the heart of it hasn't changed. Every pumpkin glowing in a window is a tiny echo of those cold earth fires. Every Halloween costume a reflection of the disguises that once kept our ancestors safe. We might laugh now, but in their world the stakes were real. Every choice, every ritual was a way to say, we will face the night, and we will survive it. So your fires are lit, your charms are hung, and your doors are locked tight. You've survived the first half of the night. But Halloween in ancient Wales wasn't just about fear, it was also about fate. Because once the danger was pushed back beyond the firelight, the people of Nos Calan Gaeaf turned their attention to something even more mysterious: the future. And in that strange in-between world, when the veil between life and death thinned to a whisper, they believed fate itself could be glimpsed. This was the time for games, though the word doesn't quite do them justice. These weren't innocent board or card games we know today. They were acts of divination, disguised as play, ways to ask questions of the unseen, about love, life, and death, and if you were brave enough to listen for an answer. And make no mistake, the spirits were listening too. The most spine-tingling game was one of silence. In parts of Wales it was said that if you stood before a mirror at midnight on Halloween, holding a candle in the dark, you might see the face of your future spouse appear behind you, or the face of death if you were not to wed or live another year. This eerie custom survived in different forms all across Britain, and it's not hard to see why. The idea of standing alone in flickering light, daring fate to show its hand, is as thrilling now as it was 1,000 years ago. And yet, beneath all the superstition, these games reveal something very human. Fear and curiosity often share the same heartbeat. Even surrounded by darkness and danger, the people of ancient Wales wanted to know what awaited them, to peek beyond the veil, even for a moment. And yes, apple games existed here too, but with a darker twist. Apples were sacred to the Celts, symbols of immortality, the other world, and forbidden knowledge. On Nos Calan Gaeaf, young people might peel an apple in one long strip, then throw it over their shoulder. The letter it formed on the ground was said to be the first initial of their future lover. Another version involved slicing an apple in half. If the seeds were whole and even, your future was bright. If they were blackened or uneven, beware. Because Nos Calan Gaeaf wasn't just a night of endings, it was a night of beginnings. The death of summer meant the birth of winter, a cycle, not a stop. And just as the dead might walk among the living, the future could brush against the present. These rituals, playful, anxious, hopeful, were ways to talk to that future, to shape it, or at least to understand it. If you imagine it now, the flicker of the last fires, the laughter mixing with nervous whispers, the soft Welsh wind tugging at cloaks, you can almost feel that same pulse in our modern celebrations. We still seek meaning in the darkness. We still play games that flirt with fear. Tarot cards, horoscopes, Halloween days, they're all echoes of that ancient urge to to ask the night what it knows. And maybe that's why we still love Halloween so much. It's not just the costumes or the sweets or the scary films, though those are part of it, of course. It's the ancient thrill of stepping close to the edge of the unknown, asking it to speak, and seeing what answers back. For the people of Wales 1,000 years ago, these games were serious magic. For us, they're harmless fun. But deep down, the same question remains, whispered through every generation, every ghost story, every midnight candle. What does the future hold? And how much of it can we dare to see? So you faced the spirits, survived the night, and maybe even learned your fate. Congratulations, you've officially made it through a Welsh Halloween. But before we leave the firelight and step back into the modern world, there's one last lesson to learn. Because the ghosts of Nos Calan Gaeaf still have something to teach us. The truth is, the people of ancient Wales weren't just superstitious, they were wise. Every story, every ritual, every whispered warning was a form of emotional armour. They didn't have electricity or central heating or social media, but they had community, imagination and ritual. And in their own way, they built psychological survival tools long before anyone had a word for them. They knew how to face fear, not by denying it, but by dancing with it. They turned anxiety into ritual, darkness into story, and the unknown into something they could name. And when you think about it, we still do the same thing. Just look at how we celebrate Halloween today. We light candles, hang skeletons, and watch horror films that make our hearts race. We laugh in the face of fear, and that's the point. Every ghost story, every jump scare is an echo of that ancient bonfire courage. We flirt with the dark, but we do it together. We transform terror into entertainment. But underneath the costumes and plastic cobwebs, the instinct is the same, to remind ourselves that fear can be faced and survived. And maybe that's why Halloween remains so beloved around the world. It's a night when everyone, no matter who they are, gets to wear their fear on the outside. We disguise ourselves, just as the people of Wales once did, but for very different reasons. They wore masks to hide from the dead. We wear them to explore who we might become. But every costume is a small act of liberation, a chance to be something else for one night, to let go of the ordinary and step into the mythic. Even the way we decorate our homes speaks to something primal. Those glowing pumpkins in the windows, they're descendants of Welsh turnips, carved not for beauty, but for protection. Our flickering LED candles are just high-tech Colsurf, little beacons against the long dark. And our Halloween parties? They're the modern echo of villagers gathered round a single fire, telling stories to hold the night at bay. There's something comforting about that continuity, that after 1,000 years we're still answering the same call. The faces have changed, the monsters have changed, but the feeling hasn't. The shiver of the unknown, the warmth of light against the cold, the laughter that always follows a good scare. It's all part of the same human heartbeat. And maybe, just maybe, the old beliefs hold a lesson we've forgotten. That fear isn't our enemy. It's a guide, a signal, a reminder of what matters. The ancient Welsh didn't hide from it. They used it to draw people together, to strengthen their communities, to remind each other that no one faced the darkness alone. In a world where so many of us now live behind screens, afraid of things we can't quite name, climate, conflict, loneliness, maybe that's the real wisdom of Nos Calan Gaeaf. That survival isn't just about food and shelter, it's about connection, ritual, belief, about finding small ways to keep our inner fire burning, even when the world outside feels cold. And if you'd like to dive deeper into these stories, the myths, the spirits, the haunted landscapes, please go and watch our other Halloween video after this one. It explores the deeper origins of Nos Calan Gaeaf, the ancient rituals and the uncanny beauty of Welsh folklore that still lingers in the hills. So, if you want to make it until dawn, keep a fire burning. Darkness loves to sneak in where there's no light. Disguise yourself. Masks, soot or cloaks can confuse wandering spirits. Stick together. The last one home might never see sunrise. Offer a little respect. Bread, milk or charms can keep the restless dead at bay. And listen to fear. It isn't your enemy, it's your guide. But for now, as our own little bonfire burns low, remember this: fear is ancient, but so is courage. And every time you laugh in the dark, light a candle or tell a ghost story, you're keeping that old Welsh magic alive. Thank you so much for watching today. Your support truly means the world to us. If you've enjoyed this journey through the shadows of Welsh Halloween, please check out some of our other videos. We release them all year round, exploring haunted valleys, ancient legends, and the mysteries that don't always wait for October to appear. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification so you never miss another journey into the darkness. If you'd like to give a little extra, please consider sending us a super thanks. Just a small way to help support the channel and allow us to keep bringing these stories to life. But as always, of course, just having you here, sharing in the mystery with us, that is what matters the most. We love bringing you these videos, and we can't wait to take you even deeper into the haunted, hidden and strange corners of Wales. And remember, the fire may burn bright tonight, but darkness is patient. It waits for the moment you look away. Until next time, be careful out there.